You were created to make a sound, not just to echo the noise. Welcome to the Amplified Era podcast. I am your host, Nadia Morris. I am here to help you push past the fear, identify the silence, and birth the purpose you've been carrying. We are leaving the safety of the shadows and stepping into the spotlight of your destiny. This is season 1, the Great Unmuzzling. So if you are ready to take the mute button of your life, let's get to work. Welcome to episode 2. So last week we talked about silence, that heavy feeling of you holding back the truth. But today we're gonna dive a little bit deeper. You normally see a doctor who has to prescribe a cure, but he has to diagnose what the issue is that you have. And so you know that you're silent, but you don't know why. And so we're gonna dive a little bit deeper today. Episode 2, Diagnosing the Muzzle. I am Nadia Morris, your Purpose Midwife. And before I even get into this episode and talking about diagnosing the muzzle, there is something that I must say based on the feedback that I've gotten concerning the last episode. Persons were encouraged to now step out, because a lot of times we are held down by fear, and that is why sometimes we just don't move. Fear, because when we start to elevate, people pull you back down. And so that is what we're going to dive into a little bit today. So there are about 3 muzzles that we're going to talk about today. And the first one is the internal muzzle. And this is the muzzle that we put on ourselves. And some of you would call it the Imposter Syndrome. And, it's not that you lack the ability, it's that you lack the internal permission that you think you need to give yourself to be able to walk and to do what you're being called to do in the land of the living. And so that muzzle, it sounds like a logical voice, like it's telling you, oh, you are not, who are you to do this, what you think that you can do? Who are you? Who are you to think that you can lead an organization? You don't have a PhD. Who are you to think that you can start a podcast? You don't have any followers. Who is going to listen to your podcast? Those are the lies that we tell. But let me tell you, you convincing yourself that you're a fraud when God has already positioned you, who has given you talents, gifts to steward and to implement in the earth. There's a reason why each of us was given something special. Each of us was given a talent, a measure of talent that we need to put to good use. So you yourself will muzzle yourself to stay small, because you think that if you stay small, that you will stay safe. And I want to also talk about what happened last week as well, because I launched the podcast on my birthday, and the videos, the short videos that would have come on as part of the marketing for this podcast, there was a comment on the video, a diatribe, I would say, outlining all the reasons why I didn't really have a muzzle on, because I was the reason why persons could not remain where they were stationed. And I'm trying to be very diplomatic about it, because I'm not a person to go back and forth with people on their opinions. And because their opinions and what God has said, they have no bearing. They have no bearing at all. Another person's opinion does not have any bearing on who you are and what you're called to do. And so I just found it very intriguing that after launching the first episode of the Amplified Era, that in short, what they were trying to do was to shut me up, to make me feel as if I am not called and I'm not chosen by God. And first of all, you have the evidence, and that is how you tackle the imposter syndrome. You have to look at the evidence that you possess. Look at the miracles, signs, and wonders that follow your life. Look at what God has done, the track record of what God has done in your life. That is the evidence that you must walk with. And I am so glad that I am doing this simultaneously with the Bloom mentorship, because a week before we talk about identity, and that same week when I launched the podcast, my identity was attacked, right? And then we talk about healing and clarity just last week, and that's the focus for this week for the cohort. And healing and clarity means that whatever wounds, unhealed wounds that you have walking around with, that is the lens that we normally see through. And so all of this is really practical examples of what we are walking through this program, simultaneously launching this podcast, that there are some people who are walking around with unhealed wounds, who don't understand themselves, and who project onto you and expect that because rejection is their portion, that is something that you also have or want to dive into, right? Rejection is not my portion. And the fact that I've walked through this journey, and this is always a person's who have not walked with you on your journey personally, who don't know you, because the people who know you, right? And they know the journey. And I'm glad that I have witnesses to my journey, and there's a cloud of witness as well in heaven concerning my journey. So you have to know yourself, and you have to operate from a healed place to be able to walk out this calling that God has really ordained for you. So really and truly, you're not really afraid of failing. You are afraid of being seen failing. And that is what I believe persons are waiting on, because persons naturally, and I'm going to talk about that now in the next muzzle, the external muzzle, the environment, when silence is forced upon you by other people. And it could be in the workspace, it could be that crab in a barrel culture, right? And it could be cultural expectations as well. And before we even talk about the workspace, I want to talk about the crab in a barrel culture that we have, especially in the Caribbean. And I don't know if it's prevalent elsewhere, but we know in Jamaica the crab in a barrel mentality. When you start to grow, family, friends will want to muzzle you because your growth highlights their stagnation, right? And I would also add as well that your godly instructions can scare other people who do not operate in a kingdom mindset. And I was drawn to the scripture 1 Corinthians 2 verse 14, where it speaks about the natural person cannot comprehend spiritual things. First and foremost, if you're not operating by the Spirit, there is no way that you can discern spiritual things. So that all of last week I've been reflecting, since last week Thursday I should say, I've been reflecting, and these are the things that has really dawned on me, that there are people out there who see you, they don't know what you've walked through, what the things that you've had to go through, the secret place that you've had to sat in silence, sometimes in tears before God, and they don't understand what you had to walk through to be able to stand and to do the things that you do with grace, do it effortlessly, and with poise. And so people will underestimate you, and that is the word, underestimate you, because they know where you are coming from, and so they're gonna put a muzzle on you to say, look here, the growth that you're experiencing, this is not what we expected for you. And that is what I spoke about last week, this underestimation, to know that to say that you cannot, and it's impossible for you to move up the ranks in corporate, and you have to be doing it in a way that is not kingdom like. I'm flabbergasted at people. Well, I can't be flabbergasted, because that is a mentality when you have a crab in a barrel mentality, right? That culture of crab in a barrel, because not everybody needs to sleep their way to the top, and not everybody needs to carry news to get their way to the top. And the fact is, and I've spoken about my testimony time and time again, that this prophecies about elevation and promotion has been swirling since 2019, even before I understood who I was. So the fact that God's promises are yes and amen, nobody, and I mean no one, can be able to thwart the purposes that God has for your life. And sometimes we can talk about the workspace. People, they interrupt you, they take the credit for your ideas, or you give feedback that is just criticism designed to lower your confidence, right? There are people like that, and there's some cultural expectations as well. The same thing, you're too enough for you to stay in your lane, and women should not be seen and heard, don't be too aggressive. And sometimes the muzzle is really not in your head, it's in the room, and the room is whispering into your ear. And for me, if you're a tropical plant trying to bloom in the Arctic, it's not gonna work out for you. So what you really need to understand is that there's nothing wrong with the seed, but the soil, your environment is toxic, and you're constantly being told to tone it down, or to be realistic. That is an external muzzle. The next muzzle I want to talk about is the spiritual muzzle, right? And I'm speaking specifically to those who are disconnected between their purpose and what God can do in their lives. And for somebody called to the marketplace, there is this notion that ministry and marketplace can't come together. So if you're not singing or preaching, it's not ministry. But persons don't know what you're doing here. This podcast is ministry. How you carry yourself and how you do your work, that's ministry. And how you show up sometimes, it is ministry. So is you have this secular versus sacred trap that many of us are operating in, where you're wondering if God has called you to do this. This is your wake up call. This is your sign that not everybody is gonna prophesy about house, care, and land. There are some prophets called to the marketplace. There are some who are to be positioned as Deborahs, as Davids, as Josephs in the marketplace, as a Daniel, right? And so how you approach what you do is important. And for me, I can talk about the spiritual muzzling because, being a CEO and launching all the things that I've been doing. And, sometimes there is a disconnect actually, because I'm wondering, it doesn't sound or feel like what is deemed to be, the typical prophetic. But I've seen where God has worked and moved and done what he needs to do concerning, closing that gap between how purpose is walked into and what he requires of us in this season. So the thing is that people are going to tell you that you're too ambitious. Things that you want to do, it is beyond the church walls. And so your purpose, I'm just trying to tell you, your purpose is not just what you do in the church building, is really what you're called to do in business. The marketplace is actually your pulpit, so I don't want you to muzzle your gift because it doesn't look like traditional ministry. So the next thing I want to jump into is that there is a cost when you wear a muzzle, and I want to talk about the cost a little bit. And the two of them, for me, it can show up as resentment, because when you become silent, it doesn't just, your purpose or whatever you're called to do doesn't just vanish, it starts to rot. And so you can now walk into a space where these unexpressed potential turns into bitterness towards other people who are doing it, the same thing you're called to do, and other people now are walking in that. You're going to start resenting them because you should have gotten up to do what needs to be done, but instead you start resenting because that is the cost it's going to pay you, because it's whatever you were supposed to do is like you're sitting with it, it's rotting away, and you're not really walking out how you're supposed to walk out. And it also affects you physically through physical stress. When you shut up and you muzzle yourself, it's gonna feel like those tension headaches that never stop, and you get exhausted from pretending, because when you're muzzled, you're really pretending because you're not really walking in your full potential. So you're really and truly, you're gonna feel tired from doing all of that. All right, so there are 3 signs, I will call them the check engine light, that you can use to self-diagnose. All right, for some persons, it's gonna be that meeting hangover, where you're sitting at a meeting and you're wondering, should I have said this? What did I say wrong? You start replaying the conversations in your head over and over again for hours, and you sit down and you wonder what went wrong and what you did and how you could have done it different. That is one. The other one is you start to over apologize. You're saying sorry for taking up your space, for asking a question, for simply existing. You're gonna over apologize. And one thing I'm learning in this season is that I'm not apologizing for anything that God has called me to do. I'm not apologizing for this confidence that God has instilled in me, because when God anoints you for a purpose and for a thing, you cannot walk around apologizing for the greatness that God has placed in you, because God has called you to be great. You are made in His image. He's expecting greatness from you. He's expecting you to have dominion in the earth. He's expecting much more from you in the earth. And so you cannot be apologizing, walking around apologizing for the fact that you're called, set apart, and chosen for a time such as this. And the other check engine light I have to pay attention to as well is the deflection. When somebody compliments you, you immediately shoot it down. It was just luck. Oh, this old little thing. You start to deflect because why? You're not comfortable in your own skin and what you are called to do. So if you're nodding to any of these, the meeting hangover, the over apologizing, the deflection, you are driving the car of your life with the emergency brake pulled up. That is what you're doing. You are literally, have you ever tried to drive a car with the emergency brake pulled up? Yeah, but you're moving, but there's a lot of friction and there is smoke. And if you don't fix it, then what happens? The engine goes bad. And so I am just here to implore you that there is so much more out there for you. And don't allow other persons to muzzle you. Don't allow yourself to muzzle you, and don't allow a spiritual muzzle to be placed on you, because you don't know how to place yourself. You don't know where you fall. You don't know who you are. And so I am just here to encourage you. And of course, we're gonna have an assignment, and this assignment is really about sitting and diagnosing one of the muzzles that you would have what I would have mentioned that you need to work on. So you're not going to try to fix all three, but I want you to think about it. Is it that there's an imposter in your head? Is it that there's a toxic person who is, or environment that you need to deal with? Or is there a doubt in your spirit that you need to work on, that spiritual muzzle? So what you have to do now is to name it, write it down, because next week in episode 3 we're going to learn how to replace the silence with the sound of the amplified era. And so, thank you for joining in this on this episode. That's, it is a journey. I am here for it. It's not the easiest thing to do. That God has called you to do something, and so here we are. We don't know how it's gonna end up. We don't know what it's gonna look like, but I am determined to see what the end is going to be. So for me, I have taken off my muzzle, so I don't plan to put it back on. So it doesn't matter what anybody has to say about what they think about who I am. I know who I am, and the bottom line is God doesn't need a co-author for anybody's life at all. He knows what he's doing, and his will is just perfect. And so that is where I would definitely leave it today, because it is what it is. It is what it is, and it is what it's gonna be. So see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining me today. Bye. Thank you for stepping into the amplified ear with me today. If this episode sparked a fire in you, don't let it burn out. The best way to support this movement is to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a woman who is ready to find her voice. You can connect with me on social media at Nadia, the Purpose Midwife, to keep the conversation going. And remember, the muzzle is off, the silence is broken, and you have permission to take up space. Until next time, keep blooming.